Welcome, everybody, to a very special road trip edition of the Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show, part of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show family. Zach Meisel is in Philly. I'm in Seattle. That's not exciting for Guardians fans, but Zach's in Philly, where the Guardians are about to start a series. Zach was just schooling me up on some restaurants in Seattle. Zach, do you have a place that you've picked out for dinner in Philadelphia tonight?
I have. It's called the Citizens Bank Park Press Box, most likely. I don't know the last time the team was here. I want to say they were here in 16 maybe, but I don't think I made that trip. I
Okay.
remember there was a trip here in 13. I remember Roberto Perez broke his finger, or that must have been in 16.
Okay.
13 they were here though, like in April. I think they got swept and it was ugly.
Yeah.
I have no idea. This is a quick in and out trip. I can't leave my phone or my laptop for more than 10 seconds.
And that's because the trade deadline is coming up. We're going to talk about that, with that happening Tuesday. We're going to talk about Travis Bazzana making his professional debut with the Lake County Captains tonight. That and a whole lot more on the Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show. Zach, will you have a chance to eat a cheesesteak? Will they serve you a cheesesteak in the press box?
Yeah, I would like to, time permitting, do a lap around the ballpark. I like to do that pretty much every trip and scout out some potential food options for later in the series. I do know there's like a famous guy who it felt like everybody wrote about him last year or the year before, who scoops ice cream in the press box. So I don't know. Maybe they have really good ice cream.
Take advantage of that.
Yeah.
Is there overall to this point, would you say, and have you been in every press box at this point that you can think of?
I've not been in the new Atlanta.
Okay.
I'm missing a couple.
All right. Of the ones you've been to, what is the best food spread and the worst? We'll leave Cleveland out of it because that's the home team. But of the road teams, what's the best that stands out and the worst that stands out? Press box food.
I mean, Yankee Stadium is the best. It's just head and shoulders better than anywhere else. The options, the quality, the desserts are just insane. It's like, when you walk into a cheesecake factory and they have the display cases of like 50 kinds of cheesecakes.
Yeah.
That's what this is like. And it's amazing. And it's the same price as the garbage spread at the White Sox stadium.
Really?
Yeah. So it does factor into how much you enjoy a certain trip, as sad as that is, because it's hard to escape, especially in New York. I can't leave Yankee Stadium and go wander and find some good meal to bring back. Right. So it's an important aspect of the job, I would say.
No doubt about it. And the worst? Do you have a worst? Is it the White Sox?
The White Sox is pretty bad. Oakland's used to be bad, and then they actually just got rid of it and would give you a coupon to the concessions for a minute. Nice. And then they brought it back this year. It was pretty good.
Okay.
It was maybe the best thing about going for the Oakland Athletics at the moment.
Yeah. So. I mean, are you going to go to Sacramento next year and sit and now you're going to pass on that?
That's probably when they move to Vegas, I'll be there every season.
What's going to be interesting, true. But what's going to be interesting next year is that I've heard Oakland is one of the worst hitters parks in baseball, and Sacramento is going to be one of the better ones.
How can they get it to feel like a major league stadium? That's my question.
I don't know.
It's like 14,000 if they open up some outfield grass areas and things like that. So I just wonder if it's going to have a legitimate feel.
I don't know. They were probably averaging less than 14,000 a game this year, and in a big stadium. But that'll be interesting. By the way, speaking of totally off topic, but this Lawrence Butler of the A's, have you seen how hot this guy's been for the last couple of weeks?
Well, I saw something where there have been 3 teams to score 18 runs in a game this year. Yeah, I think the Rockies actually ruined this stat the other night because they put 20 up on the Red Sox, but it's also the Rockies who are terrible. But it was Oakland all 3 times.
Yeah,
it's bizarre. And then I saw the one game they did it. Butler had 3 home runs.
Right. He had another home run yesterday. This has been crazy. Meanwhile, let's get to the Guardians, of course. We'll talk about the trade deadline because we're already seeing teams starting to get active. All of a sudden, the last 15, 16 hours, We've seen, I think, 3 or 4 trades happen. We'll get to those. And in fact, the Guardians haven't done anything yet. But the Guardians' second half of the season gets off to a slow start, kind of like it ended. They lose yesterday 3-0. The bats have continued to be cold. Remember, they scored 7 the first game after the break, although they scored 6 of those late in the game. And since then, they've scored 0, 1, 2, 5, 2, and 0. They lost their first homestand of the year, split 4 with the Tigers. But for all the talk about the pitching, and yeah, they need pitching, the bats have just been ice cold since coming back from the break, and they weren't great the week or two before the break.
They've played 20 games this month, and in only 9 of them have they scored 3 runs or more. 11 times. That's more than half the time they're scoring 0, 1, or 2, and it's not going to get it done. And actually, credit to the rotation, which has, it's still needs help, but it has not been the issue the last few weeks. And so, the numbers are kind of jarring. I think we said this last time, but it's easy to feel like when your team is in a funk, the sky is falling and it's the end of the world, and this is just who they are. And I think it's also, they weren't as good as they were when they were 51-26 and they were having scorching hot numbers with runners in scoring position. But it's hard for them to win when in July, David Fry, slugging percentage, 213. Jose Ramirez on base percentage, 298. Naylor, slugging percentage, 353. Even Stephen Kwan on base percentage, 298. Like, those 4 guys are all sputtering at the same time. And so Schneeman's been dreadful lately. And Angel Martinez is cooled off some. Will Brennan is 0 for 17 since returning from the injured list. Like, those guys who are trying to find their footing as big leaguers, they're going to go through ups and downs. What hurts is when you have all 4 of your all-star hitters scuffling at the same time. It's really hard to overcome that. So that's not going to last forever.
Right.
But you think it underscores the fact that as much as the rotation needs help, and there's no doubt about that, just because they don't have the quantity. They don't have there's just no one lurking below. At least offensively, you can say, well, I'd like to see what Manzardo can do again. I'd like to see what Juan Brito could add. But I don't think it's just the pitching. I think they also need an established hitter, and they've got a few days to acquire one.
The good news, even though they've lost 15 of 25 and have played average at best baseball going on a month, is that they still remain 4.5 games, 4 in the loss column over the Twins, 5.5 games and 6 in the loss column over Kansas City, with 60 games to go in the season. So
they're still tied for the best record in the American League. It seems hard to fathom.
It's right. They're not playing well right now. That doesn't make them a bad team. They're not. And ultimately, it's funny. We talked about this on Monday, the fact that baseball's an imperfect sport, and there's always somebody going to struggle. The best players will have bad stretches. Unfortunately, their best players, at least offensively, are all struggling at the same time. Whereas early in the season, it was like, Jose wasn't great in April. It wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great. And then he got hot. Naylor cooled off, and Fry was kind of hot the whole time. And Kwan was hot, and then Kwan gets hurt, and Naylor picks it up again. But now, for the last few weeks, they've all struggled. Kwan, it's been a little longer than Fry, it's been a little longer than the other guys. But overall, all 4 have struggled. We thought Kwan had the batting title in the bag. He certainly does not now, the way Bobby Witt has played. But it is not time to panic, but it is time for the team, the organization, the front office to get serious. And they need to show that they're trying to win. I think that's what we need to find out. Because if the Guardians sit on their hands or only do minor things between now and the deadline Tuesday afternoon, they're showing that the organization is not committed to winning if that's what they do.
Yeah.
And that would be disappointing.
I have a few things on that. Number one, we've talked about this ad nauseum. There's no reason not to be aggressive. You have a team that deserves to have your belief in it. think the fan base has responded well to this team, and you can build on that momentum, and it means something. It's not just about this year, but if you get fans captivated and you prove to them and you prove to the players in that clubhouse that, hey, we want to arm you guys with a little more talent to try to push us over the top, everyone's going to buy in. It's going to help you going into next year too. If you don't go for it, why are fans going to buy tickets for next year?
That's right.
Just to hope that once again they find themselves in position. And are you gonna capitalize at next year's deadline? Are you gonna do something this winter? I mean, I understand it can be very difficult this time of year to execute exactly what you need. And we keep pointing to 2016 when they got Andrew Miller and they got Brandon Guyer and they almost got Jonathan Lucroy, and it seemed like a perfect storm. And that might be an unfair standard to use as a reference point. However, the Mariners are in a free fall. You think things are bad in Cleveland and that the Guardians have been struggling and that they've really struggled offensively. The Mariners had a huge lead in the West. The Astros were left for dead, and now the Mariners are staring up at them in the division, and they know they need more than anyone hitters. And what did they do last night? Randy Arozarena is probably checking into your hotel right now, Bull, and he's a flawed player, but it just shows they were aggressive. They knew what they needed and they went and addressed that. I think it is just as obvious. We've been talking about Cleveland needing to trade for a starting pitcher since like late April. All right. So there's no excuse. You have to be like the American League. The fact that you've gone through this really rough patch it wasn't just, a bad week. It's been a bad month and you're still tied for the best record in the American League. That just shows you how open it is, that the opportunity is there.
Yeah.
So I think there would be disappointment in the clubhouse if nothing happened. I think it's difficult. I know the Guardians were starting to reach out to teams about a month ago, just trying to figure out the market with the intent of being buyers. Like that's never been a question. They've always been on the hunt to add talent. And I would just wonder if they don't get what they want or they make a minor move or two, what happened, why it didn't happen, and what you can do to make that work. I think a big thing is two things can be true at once. One, I think they need to make trades and they need to be aggressive. They need to win this deadline. And two, it is still imperative. Like the things that Chris Antonetti and Mike Chernoff have said about them needing internal performances to improve or to maintain is true.
Yes.
Like Gavin Williams is critical. He's probably more important than any pitcher that they're going to add at the deadline. They need him right. They need him to be able to take the ball in game 2 of a playoff series, and they feel like they have the advantage. I know he really only made one mistake on Thursday, but that's a bad mistake. Javi Baez should not be taking anybody deep. He left a slider down the middle. Right. And how the Tigers felt confident, I'm sure, going into the series opener with Skubal against Carrasco. Yep. Guardians should have been feeling that way in the series finale with Gavin Williams against a bullpen game. Yep. And they lost. So they need Gavin Williams. They need their all-stars to step up, and they need somebody to emerge. I don't know if it is Brennan, if it's someone at AAA, if Manzardo or Brito need to come up, if it's Tyler Freeman maybe getting back into an everyday role, Bo Naylor finally turning a corner. Like they need all of the above for this thing to work out. They need those external additions and they need internal improvements.
There's so much to dive into with what you just said there. And there's a lot I want to follow up on. You mentioned that Seattle, they're only 2 games over 500. They got aggressive. People have looked at Arozarena's season numbers and like, well, he's not that good right now. Look at his numbers since June 1st. And the guy's been a good hitter his whole career. We know he's clutch in the postseason. He's gotten many key hits and many home runs in the postseason. And since June 1st, he's back to the player that he's been, most of his career. And, that's a 2-month stretch almost. So that's legit. Arizona, they're not having a great season, but they went to the World Series last year. They went out and got a relief pitcher. Boston traded for James Paxton. Not a huge deal, but they add up. Baltimore, we know they're going for it. They got Sir Anthony Dominguez from Philadelphia. That was a rare contending team trade, Dominguez for Austin Hayes there between Baltimore and Philly this morning. So other teams are getting aggressive. Now, if the Guardians get aggressive on the 30th or the 29th as opposed to the 25th or the 26th, that's fine. But it has to happen. And there is no excuse. I am going to lose. I am going to go. I'm telling you right now, I'm going ape shit if they do nothing. Or if the only move, like I said, James Paxton from the Dodgers to the Red Sox, that's a small move. If that's like, I'm fine with that type of move as long as that's not the only move. The Guardians, 2016 is not too high a standard. In fact, I want them to do more than that. When I mentioned, I mentioned this the other day. When I tweeted out like trade possibilities for the Guardians, people said I'm crazy. Yankee fans would be like, yes, let's do that. Let's do that. Now's the time. I'm not asking. We don't ask the Guardians to do this every year. I haven't gone this all in on the Guardians. They have to be all in this year. There is no excuse. The Orioles are not playing well right now. The Yankees are not playing well right now. The Twins had gotten hot for a while. They've cooled off. Kansas City's playing well. But nobody really, outside of like Houston maybe, there's not a lot of teams in the American League that are playing great baseball. So the excuse can't be, well, we're struggling right now. No. The Guardians, as you said, are tied for the best record in baseball. They need to act like it at this trade deadline. And again, I don't want to go too crazy because we got plenty of time here. We got till Tuesday. But it can't be no moves or one minor move or a Spencer Howard type move. I don't want to hear that crap. They've got to, and they should be making multiple additions. Because if not now, when? As you said, the attendance is there. The owner of the team has talked about, he's referenced the attendance quite a bit over his history. And the fans have come out. They've been out. There's been sellouts. There's been enthusiasm and excitement. And I'll tell you what, if this team continues to struggle and they do nothing at the deadline, then a lot of people are turning the page to the Browns. It's already starting to happen with training camp starting. And I want to see, I loved it with covering the Browns. It's great. But I want to keep the spotlight on the Guardians too. And people are going to turn the page if they sit on their hands and continue to struggle.
Yeah, that's well said. What's interesting is 2016 is such a fascinating case study because how they won in the playoffs was so different than how they won in the season. I mean, they got to where they got because that rotation was so good.
Right.
It was deep. You had reliable guys who could throw 180, 200 innings, rack up strikeouts, and you could just lean on Kluber, Carrasco, Bauer. Salazar was an all-star that year. And then you get to the postseason, and you don't have Carrasco. You don't have Salazar. Bauer's got 9 fingers. And you have to lean so heavily on that bullpen and timely hitting, too, and winning matchups. So making sure you're using Rajai Davis and Brandon Guyer against lefties, and they're delivering. Remember Coco Crisp? Crisp, who hit a home run in their division clinching game, their ALDS clinching game, and their ALCS clinching game? Like, that was a key addition at the waiver deadline. And obviously, we know how they leaned on Andrew Miller. So what that tells me is if you're going to stand pat or do something minor, and you're going to say, well, the way we win games is leaning on our bullpen, which has not sprung a leak yet this year, incredibly.
Yeah.
And lean on young hitters developing or getting timely hitting or whatever. What happens if Tanner Bybee cramps up and it's a little worse? What happens if Gavin Williams, who missed 3 months with an elbow injury, has a setback? What happens if Cade Smith pulls an oblique? I mean, you're just making assumptions that how you've won games the first 4 months is how you can win games later on. That'd be great. If they enter the playoffs and everybody's healthy, I think it minimizes the warts in the rotation, the fact that you can lean on the bullpen more because of off days. Now, you don't know how Hunter Gaddis and Cade Smith and Tim Herron are going to hold up in October when they're rookies. Right. So I think everything points to they should be aggressive. And I know just from what the tenor of their talks were with other teams early on, there's been no doubt in their mind. So I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt until Tuesday at 6:01 p.m. Eastern. But, it's going to be interesting because it's a weird market. I think it is very possible to acquire a reliever. And I think they're going to have to make a decision, if it's too difficult to acquire a real impact starting pitcher, then maybe they should go. There could be like 5 different closers traded, not including AJ Puck, who we already saw move going to Arizona last night. You could. Pete Fairbanks is available. Kyle Finnegan's available. Carlos Estevez will be moved. Tanner Scott will be moved. There are guys out there. So I think.
And even other setup guys. I've mentioned Yimi Garcia, Mark Leiter Jr., Hector Neris. I mean, there's a ton of relievers to be had. And let's face it, Randy Arozarena, they didn't give up a ton to get him, the Mariners.
I'm curious what the player to be named will be. And I don't want to like cut the Guardians slack, because if they don't go get a better hitter than Randy Arozarena, then they should have gone and tried to get Randy Arozarena. But
right. Yeah.
But I do think if they're scared off by the season he's had, and he's been a lot better the last 2 months than he was the first 2 months, but he's also making $8 million. He's probably going to make 8 figures next year and even more the year after that in arbitration. I understand, he's not a good defender. And the Rays are different. The Rays, you can't just say this team gave up its number 12 prospect and 18 prospect, and so that would be in the Guardian system, this guy and this guy. Like, the Rays will identify people that they like who are completely different than people other teams like. I mean,
that's true.
They identified Junior Caminero from the Guardians when he was 18 and had next to no professional experience, and 2 years later, he's top 3 prospect in baseball. So they're tricky to study, but there's no excuse though. Like, you have to go add a bat. And the main point is, as you were saying, it's like, it doesn't even matter what you add. Just add multiple talented players. Yeah. That's the bottom line. Don't care what part of the roster they affect. Just get better.
Yeah, have to do it. All right, let's read some fan comments. Let's see. Aryan says they need a veteran bat that can slot in at 5 in October, putting so much pressure on all these young guys. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the pitching, but that they need a guy who can bat in the middle of the lineup, a proven power hitter. If you can get a guy who has already a track record of success in the playoffs, that would be ideal. But if you can't, you got to get someone that's been a good, consistent power hitter, slugger, middle of the lineup guy. That is imperative.
Brent Rooker.
Yeah.
Like, even, Taylor Ward is not having a great season. So you want to make sure you pay 2024 Taylor Ward, not 2022 Taylor Ward when he had a really good year. But that's an upgrade over Will Brennan and Daniel Schneemann or whoever is playing right field, so it's
Ian Happ could be a possibility. I know position-wise it probably doesn't make sense, but it's interesting that Yandy Diaz could be traded. And, Luis Robert, again, I don't. Would the White Sox trade him to the Guardians? I don't know.
What are the White Sox doing? Does anybody know?
Oh my God, are they gonna? Do you think they're gonna break the record for the worst record ever?
I checked a couple days ago. They were on pace for 42 and 120.
Right. The worst record ever was the 62 Mets were an expansion team. They were 40 and 120.
Yeah.
They only played 160 that year for some reason. They have lost 11 in a row, the White Sox, to fall to 27 and 78.
They're only going to get worse here if, they trade. I would think they'd certainly trade Eric Fetty, who would be a perfect fit in Cleveland.
Yep.
They probably should trade Robert and or Crochet. Bless you. Yeah. I know Crochet made some demands now, which honestly, good on him.
Smart.
Should. Yeah.
Smart, very smart. He's in a good negotiating position. Brett says if they don't end up with one of these guys, is it a failure? Rooker, Flaherty, Fetty, or Eflin? I mean, it doesn't have to be one of those 4 guys. I'm interested in all those guys. They would all make sense for the Guardians. It's a fail. We'll know it's a failure when the deadline passes or not. I mean, it doesn't have to specifically be those guys, but
Eflin's an interesting one. I think they like him. He also is guaranteed $18 million next season. And I was told that 2024 salary, they can deal with whatever. 2/3 of it has already been paid. So that's not an issue. Future salaries, they are trying to stay away from anybody who's guaranteed $20 million or more.
Mm-hmm.
Eflin's guaranteed, I think, 18 next year. He's weird. He was really good. One of the best pitchers in the league in 2023. And then this year, like his strikeout rate has taken a tumble. His ERA is 4.09. Like he still could be a good pitcher. I always, it's like with Cleveland and the Rays, like the Guardians and Rays, other teams don't want to make trades with these two teams when it comes to pitching. And so when these two teams make trades involving pitching, I don't know what to think.
Yeah, that's true. I don't like that there's any limit. I could live with getting a guy for $18 million, but there should be no limit. The team should spend it anyway.
Yeah, and I also think it's, can a team cover part of the other salary?
Right. And you got to give up better prospects.
This was more of an issue when I was thinking about Chris Bassett or Kevin Gossman from the Blue Jays. Now it seems like the Blue Jays are going to inexplicably hang on to a lot of guys. Yeah. So there aren't a ton of guys in that boat. Like Nathan Eovaldi's another one who could make. I think he's got a player option for $20 million for next year, but I think the Rangers are going for it now. So
we've talked about Tyone. He's guaranteed $18 million the next 2 years. Real quick, let me just mention this, folks. If you're thinking about tickets for the next homestand for the Guardians, make sure you get the Game Time app. Baseball in the summer, there's nothing better. Hopefully the Guardians will have a trade. A lot of good teams coming to town. Make sure you use the Game Time app for the cheapest tickets, the best deals. And if you download the Game Time app now and create a new account, use the code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, there you go. All right, let's get a few more comments from the fans here. What do we have? We have Mitch says, give me two pitchers, a top three guy in the rotation, and someone to shore up the back end. Give me Rooker, and I'll consider this deadline a massive win. Yeah, the Guardians, I know it feels unrealistic, and maybe it will turn out to be, but they should acquire three legitimate players. I'm not saying three stars. I'm saying three guys that are legitimate contributors. And whether that's two pitchers and a hitter, two starters, one starter, one bullpener, one hitter, whatever it's got to be. But they have to add some serious things. I think that would give the team juice, just like last year when they traded Savali. And it probably made sense. And the team lost momentum, right? And they felt deflated. If they don't make a move this year, obviously they're not going to sell. But if they don't make a move this year or anything significant, there's no doubt that the guys are going to be deflated because they've earned that right to have some additions.
You already heard it. I asked Tanner Bybee after his start the other night about sort of the situation they're in this year compared to last year, where he was a rookie, wide-eyed, worrying about himself and staying in the big leagues, and he's looking around the room, and there goes Savali, there goes Ahmed Rosario, there goes Josh Bell, there's a no-hitter, there's a mutiny, there's just a mess.
Yeah.
And this year, there won't be any of that, but he said it himself. He said, I hope we're buyers.
Yeah, of course.
Right. And so, and again, like it's not, the front office is not sitting there saying like, I think we just shouldn't do anything.
No.
But what has to happen is they have to get uncomfortable.
Yes.
And we've seen them do that. And that's why I do think there's this narrative out there that they never do anything.
Right, which is not true.
And that's not true. In the offseason, sure. But they have made I mean, I know it's been a while. And again, I'm not excusing anything. Like if they sit on their hands at the deadline, that is a failure. But we've seen them, the Andrew Miller trade, the next year they went and got Jay Bruce. The next year they got Josh Donaldson and they got Brad Hand, who was the best closer on the market at that time. The Ubaldo Jimenez trade kind of came out of nowhere. The Guardians were not good at that time. They thought they were going to be good moving forward. So we've seen them be aggressive and trade prospects, their top prospects. We all said, whoa, that feels like a lot to give up. And it usually isn't in the end.
Nope.
And I think they need to act the same way. They have log jams at first base, in the middle infield. For I think they should go acquire an outfielder, even though I also would love to see Chase DeLauder up here at some point next season helping. It's common sense. And I think other teams know it too. Other teams can see, hey, you've got Travis Bazzana coming. He's going to debut for Lake County tonight and could be with you, at some point early next season.
Right.
So we're not stupid. We know that you have no place to play Juan Brito. But, like, that's the thing. Like, you've got to – where is Jose Tena going to fit into your future plans? So you've got to trade from some of this stockpile. We've been talking about that for years, and there's never been a better time to do it.
No, the last few years, it wasn't the time. This year is the time, no doubt. Captain America Bleeds tweets, or not, sends a message in the chat. Arozarena, huge move for Seattle. Come on, Tribe, go grab up Robert Jr. JG says Rooker is overrated, horrible defender, having a career year. I think Fetty and Paul DeYoung make the most sense. I'm not a big believer in Paul DeYoung. I know he's hit a lot of home runs. I mean, I'm fine if they get him, but I don't love him. There's guys I like more. What do you think of Paul DeYoung?
He's a whatever. I think I would rather just see Juan Brito up here and slide Jimenez to shortstop.
Let's see.
With Rooker, I mean, he certainly is having a career year.
Yeah.
That's why I think Oakland should trade him, even if
no doubt.
The other thing is, anything you read this time of year, everyone's posturing. If a team says we're not trading this guy, well, that's because they want everyone to up their offers, right? So with Rooker, Giankensi Noel's been playing right field. Daniel Schneemann, who is a shortstop, has been playing right field. So I don't really care too much about the glove. I care about the fact that guy's got an OPS over 900, and he's got 3 more years of control.
Yeah.
And he's 29 years old because he's a late bloomer. Oakland's going to Sacramento next year. I don't know that, they need to hang on to Brent Rooker in his 30s as they go through this painful rebuild.
As you said, the Guardians' defense in the outfield outside of Stephen Kwan is suspect anyway. So who cares if his defense is no good? You need a bat. You need a guy who can hit home runs, and that's exactly what he can do. Trey asks, what are some trade deadline predictions you have? I do think Oakland's going to trade Rooker. I think Tampa Bay's going to trade Yandy Diaz. I think Tampa Bay's going to make a bunch of deals here.
Yeah.
I think the Cubs are going to trade Jamison Tyone. I wouldn't be surprised if they traded Ian Happ or Nico Horner. I think, certainly I think Garrett Crochet might not get traded because I think the White Sox will screw up this deadline. I'm sure they will because they don't know what the hell they're doing there. Colorado, I think Kyle Freeland could be an interesting guy. Cal Quantrill, obviously, who's had a solid year.
The thing to remember is,
yeah,
any player you don't trade for, someone else will.
That's right.
And that's a team that is likely competing with you to win a championship.
Yes, Baltimore's already made a move. They're going to be aggressive. Now's the time for them too. They're not they have bigger payrolls than the Guardians, but they're not traditional big spenders. They're not the Yankees. They should go for it now. They might even make. If I were them, I would give up with their prospect because obviously their farm system is better than anybody.
Yeah.
If I were them, I would go all in for Tarek Skubal if I'm Baltimore. Because they have the prospect capital to get him. They may be the only team that has that. And if they go into the playoffs with a 1-2 punch of Burns and Skubal,
with a great lineup, they'd be the favorites.
They got a bullpen issue. They need to trade for a closer too. I know they got Dominguez from Philly, but he's not having a great year.
But that's the thing. Those teams are going to do what they need to do.
Yeah, Yankees are going to get aggressive. They're not going to sit on their hands. I can't imagine. It wouldn't surprise me if Minnesota did something. Kansas City, it was a smaller move, but they traded for Hunter Harvey from Washington.
Yeah, they might not be done either. I wouldn't be surprised if they added another reliever.
Right. And again, nobody's comparing us to the Yankees,
Houston.
but if Kansas City and Baltimore and the Twins, if those teams can make moves, then the Guardians should be able to make moves. Seattle, same thing.
And this stuff can I know fans get frustrated sometimes because Cleveland's front office is so tight-lipped.
Yeah.
And a lot of this stuff comes from agents and scouts and stuff too. So that's what makes it difficult. But
true.
A lot of times this stuff comes out of nowhere. I mean, the Andrew Miller trade came out of absolutely nowhere.
Yes.
The Mike Clevenger trade, there were whispers that they wanted to deal with him, but that whole arrangement pretty much came out of nowhere. So you never know. There's a long way to go between now and Tuesday night.
Somebody asked us about Blake Snell. He struggled. He was one of those late signers. He's been better since he's come back. His salary
got a
was $32 million. He's $30 million player option for next year. So,
I believe I read half of it is deferred a couple years, so that might be a better question for David Blitzer. But
yeah.
No one's ever spoken to him, so
yeah, right. John says, I appreciate you both and all the hard work you've done over the years. Guardians ownership needs to step up and show their commitment to the city's fans. Agreed, and thank you, John. Brett, thank you for reading my question. I listed those 4 because I don't think there'll be anyone else more moved of that impact. I think there will, from the guys you mentioned before. Trace says Paul DeYoung. We mentioned him. Gaming with Brian says Cody Bellinger. He's got a tricky contract that if he doesn't opt out, the Guardians are not going to pay that contract, so it's weird. Robert says, I would trade Josh Naylor if they could get a top player. That doesn't make any sense, trading Josh Naylor.
Maybe this winter.
Yeah, that's a
conversation for.
The problem with Josh Naylor is he's one of those guys that I think other teams aren't going to look at as valuable as he is to you, unfortunately.
And he's only under control through next year.
Right. That's right. Finally, Tom says, we've held on to prospects too long that it's diminished their trade value. They can't keep doing that. There's definitely some truth there, Zach.
Yeah. What do you think Gabriel Arias and Brian Rocchio could fetch you at the moment?
Not much, if anything.
Tyler Freeman.
I know this is Zach's favorite question, so I'll read this before we go. What about Trevor Bauer? Right. We've talked about this a million times, but go ahead.
It's not happening.
Not happening. By the way, Trevor, if it's not just not happening with the Guardians, whether you like it or not, nobody is signing Trevor Bauer. If he was going to get signed, it would have happened by now. I don't think there's any the teams like the Yankees and all these teams that need pitching, nobody has signed him. Somebody would have signed him by now if he was ever going to get a chance. He's never going to get a chance. Fair or foul, doesn't matter. Corey Richmond, is Jimenez turning into a bad contract? That's a fair question. We all loved it at the time. He was average at best last year offensively, and he's below average this year.
Honestly, I was listing players who they need better performance from internally before, and I forgot about him. And I actually think that's the second straight podcast that I did forget about him because his offense has been so forgettable. He is among the best defenders I've ever seen.
Yes. Fantastic.
But they have to get more from him at the plate.
Yeah. Yeah, he had the all-star year, and we were all bragging. Some people thought he was better than Francisco Lindor, and he has not been since that year. Not close offensively the last year. In fact, Lindor has turned out that after a bad start this year, he's having a hell of a season.
Yeah, he has. The fans' chants at Citi Field have gone from boo to MVP.
Yeah, right. He's not winning the MVP, but he's having a great year. Kyle's finally the last one. If you had to say right now, what is a name you think the Guardians land? Zach? Give me one name.
It's so hard.
It's an impossible question.
I don't know because I've heard some names floated out there, but either they don't pass the smell test or it's not enough to feel confident in it. So there's one in particular that I heard a little bit ago, and I haven't had a chance to follow up on it. And
you don't want to say it?
It just doesn't. But and it kind of takes me to the point I want to make here. They don't even know. That's the thing. You spend so much time in June and July leading up to this, planting seeds, doing your groundwork, knowing what teams like about your prospects, who you can target in their system. But so much more happens in the few days before the deadline because everyone has this desperation, whether you're a buyer or a seller or you're in between and you feel like, we want to be active, but we don't know which route to take. Everyone feels that heat, and it leads to things that we never expect. So who knows if that'll happen? This is not a prediction. I think Eric Fetty in Chicago would be a perfect fit. He is a guy who has had an excellent season. He's not flashy by any means. You can hand him the ball in game 3 of a playoff series. Hope he gives you 6 innings. But he will help you get to the playoffs. And he's signed next year for $7.5 million, which is a bargain for a reliable starting pitcher. So that's someone who makes sense. That's not a prediction, but they need people who make sense. They need a couple guys like that.
All right, somebody's knocking on my hotel room door, so we're going to get out of here with that. I'm going to predict Brent Rooker. We'll see you all next time.
Nice.
Monday, back me in Seattle. You're going to be back in Cleveland?
For like 5 minutes, then to Detroit.
For 5 seconds. We'll see you on the next Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show. See you, everybody.